It is Wednesday, June 28th, the last Wednesday in June, here at our Midtown Digital Streaming Desk in Atlanta. Welcome to this week's edition of Political Update. I'm Tim Darnell, and there are a number of things happening today and tomorrow in terms of political headlines that we're following. Right now, and on Wednesday, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger was testifying before federal prosecutors from Special Investigator Jack Smith's office in Miami. This is in connection to alleged election interference from former President Donald Trump, alleged election interference that happened during the 2020 presidential election. The Georgia Secretary of State is testifying before prosecutors, as I said a moment ago, from Jack Smith's office in Miami. Jack Smith is the federal prosecutor who is investigating and who has already indicted former President Trump on several dozen counts of allegedly mishandling classified documents. The Secretary of State, who was part of a very infamous phone call back in January of 2021, in which former President Trump did indeed ask him to find approximately 11,000 votes, enough to enable the nation's 45th president to win Georgia. Secretary Raffensperger, as we all know, was very resistant to that proposal, and now the Secretary of State, a Republican who was handily reelected to a second term not too very long ago, is testifying before federal prosecutors today, Wednesday, June 28th, in connection to Jack Smith's probe into alleged mishandling of classified documents by the former president. Also happening, something that is in direct relation to the Secretary's testimony, District Attorney Bonnie Willis has said that Jack Smith's investigation into the former president's alleged mishandling of classified documents will have no impact on her more than a year-long investigation into alleged election interference from the former president. DA Bonnie Willis has been investigating, impaneled a grand jury almost a year ago to look into allegations that the former president attempted to overturn Georgia's 2020 presidential election. Now, a Miami Superior Court judge has set a mid-August trial date that is still tentative and can still be delayed, but right now, Judge Eileen Cannon has said that the former president will go on trial for allegedly mishandling classified documents in mid-August. This is roughly the same period of time in which DA Bonnie Willis here in Fulton County is expected to announce a series of indictments against perhaps Donald Trump or some of his alleged fake electors or other officials. That's something that we're going to be following from the beginning of July through September 1st is roughly the time frame that we are expecting an announcement from DA Willis in regards to her special grand jury investigation. Also happening today, June 30th, or I should say June 28th, Governor Brian Kemp is hosting an event at the state capitol where they are marking the 30th anniversary of the Georgia Lottery. The first Georgia Lottery ticket was sold on June 29th, 1993, 30 years ago, and it has proven to be a model for a lot of future state lotteries that were founded to fund higher education. Lieutenant Governor Zell Miller wrote the issue of a state-funded lottery for education purposes into one and then 2 terms as Georgia governor. Governor Miller was one of the most astute legislative leaders in Georgia history, and he really carried and championed this issue into a successful gubernatorial election and then into 2 terms as Georgia governor and also as a United States senator when he was nominated to fill the seat in the U.S. Senate by then Governor Roy Barnes in the late 1990s. The Georgia lottery, as I said, has been around for 30 years. And the official date of the first lottery ticket was indeed June 29th, 1993. Governor Brian Kemp and lottery officials and state officials are marking that event today. Also happening, an issue that really truly reflects the importance of Georgia as a political battleground state. Last week, the National Democratic Party launched a statewide blitz targeting Georgia with ads that reminded Georgians that Roe v. Wade was overturned 1 year ago. This is a decision, Dobbs versus Jackson Healthcare in the state of Mississippi. The U.S. Supreme Court overturned the nation's long-standing abortion law 1 year ago, and Democrats are hoping this issue, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, believe that this issue will be a battleground issue going forward in the 2024 election. The 2024 presidential race has gotten a lot more crowded recently. This past week, with the developments of some new additional candidates jumping into the Republican White House nomination for 2024, and Georgia continues to be at the forefront of the nation's political universe and consciousness. And we're happy to be joined on this edition of Political Update here on Atlanta News First by Adrienne Shropshire. She is the Executive Director of Black PAC, or Black PAC, which is affiliated with the Black Progressive Action Coalition. And Adrienne, thanks for joining us. Talk a little bit about the role that Georgia is going to play, hopefully at the forefront of the nation's political scene, starting from now all the way through November of 2024.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. I think that, Georgia and the people of Georgia have demonstrated over the last couple of cycles how central the state is and how central the voters are in helping to define the direction of the country. And I don't think that changes in 2024. I think that, the state remains obviously important to the national map. I think the issues that are being debated and discussed in the state have national implications. So not just like how are the voters going to show up and what impact will the voters have, but the conversations that are happening in the state are important to the national debate. And I think our conversations and discussions that are happening in states around the country. So I think that, Georgia is at the forefront of everyone's mind in terms of what work needs to be done, how many resources are going to be spent there, and in part, because 2024 matters, but we'll also see the Ossoff run election, re-election, in 26. So I think Georgia will be at the center of our national politics for some time.
Now, this week we have seen U.S. Senator Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina, jumping into the race. We are expecting that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis will announce his White House candidacy on Wednesday at 6 p.m. on Twitter with the conversation with Elon Musk. We also, on the Republican side, you're a member, executive director of Black PAC, Black PAC, affiliated with the Black Progressive Action Coalition. On the GOP side, we see a number of candidates reflecting diversity. Besides Tim Scott, conservative talk show host Larry Elder, Nikki Haley, obviously of Indian descent, Vivek Ramaswamy, of Indian descent as well. Tell us a little bit about your organization's reaction to what appears to be a pretty diverse set of candidates fielded by organizations of which you are probably diametrically opposed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, one of the challenges I think that presents itself for all of those candidates and for the Republican Party in general is that it is one thing to put forward, new faces or a diverse set of faces in terms of the candidates. We saw that last cycle during the 2022 midterms, with there being, a perhaps record number of Black candidates running on the Republican ticket. The challenge for the Republican Party, though, is that it is simply not enough if you are trying to expand your coalition, if you are trying to use diversity within the Republican Party to bring in a new and diverse set of voters. The challenge isn't with the candidates that they're putting forward. The challenge is with their policies. And the policies and the policy positions and even the rhetoric of the Republican Party for some time now has been so offensive and antithetical to what voters of color anyway have said, or in this instance, I guess, have said that they want in national politics, what they want in terms of policy solutions to the problems that plague our communities. And the Republicans have no answer to that. So their policy positions and their rhetoric is what is going to define whether or not they're able to expand their coalition, not the new faces that they put forward.
If we're talking along the lines, however, of expanding coalitions, you mentioned the slate of candidates that the Republican Party fielded in the 2022 midterms, and yet in the 2020 presidential election on the Democratic side, a record number of women candidates, female candidates, diverse candidates, African American, and yet the party chose, reliable standard bearer, if you will, Joe Biden. So far in 2024, we only have two other folks who have announced on the Democratic side, both of them well advanced in years, if I can say that, Marianne Williamson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Joe Biden will be well into his 80s. How does your coalition expand that voter network when you're fielding these traditional candidates?
Well, I don't think that, so when you look at the coalition of not just Democrats, but obviously of voters across the country that supported Joe Biden's election in 2020, that was a broad and diverse coalition, right? Broad and diverse in terms of race, broad and diverse in terms of age. And so I think that again, what people are saying is there is a type of politics that we want in this country. There is a set of policies that we think are important, both for the progress and the prosperity of American people, and that we want leaders who are going to deliver on those kinds of policies and that are going to address the kinds of issues that are obviously critical and important to the American people, whether that is the economy, whether it is gun violence and addressing gun violence, whether it is abortion and protecting women's reproductive rights. I think the American people have spoken across the board, regardless of demographic, of which party they think can deliver on those things. And we've seen it in the last 3 election cycles. And so I think that from 18 to 20 to 22 in terms of who people have chosen. And so I think there is already a diverse coalition that is supporting the Democratic ticket. And within the Democratic Party, obviously, there continues to be a diverse coalition. We saw the impact, the growth and expansion of young voters in 2022, the impact that they had on races across the country. So the Democratic coalition continues to expand, regardless of the age of the candidate that is that will be the nominee for the Democratic Party. I think that is less of a concern for people than what kind of country we are trying to be, what kind of country we aspire to be, and whether or not we are electing people who can address the most pressing issues for the American people. And clearly, over the last 3 election cycles, voters have said that that's the Democratic Party.
Do you believe the nation is polarized or paralyzed, if you will, by the whole concept of identity politics, that you have to be of a certain race or gender or nationality in order to be successful in your political endeavors. Are we a nation totally obsessed with identity politics? If we are, how do we break out of that trap, if you will?
Well, clearly we are not. And I think that your previous question, sort of, is the obvious example of that. Right, that the president of the United States was, someone who in the 2019 and 2020 Democratic presidential primary, there were these questions about who would come out and would voters choose someone who, was an older white man. And clearly they did, right? And when we look at, our elections over the last two cycles from 20 and 22, yes, we see a diverse, array of candidates being elected into office, but that is in fact who we are as a country, isn't it, right? We are a diverse people. And so when you see record numbers of women running, when you see record numbers of women of color or people of color running and winning, it is because that is who we are as a nation. And I don't think that that means in any way, shape, or form that we are somehow beholden to identity politics. I think it is the country saying that not only do we acknowledge who we are as a country and our diversity, but we believe that different perspectives are important to our being able to maintain and to evolve our democracy, right? And to have a legitimate democracy that takes into consideration all of its people. And so I don't think that it means that somehow we've gone overboard in terms of identity politics. I think that it means that we have embraced who we are broadly as a people, and we are a diverse country with diverse ideas, whether that diversity is race or gender or economic status. We are, I think, trying to reflect, right? When we talk about what does it mean to move toward a more perfect union, it is, in fact, our ability to say, yes, this is who we are in all of our parts, and that we want a government that reflects that as well.
We are talking about the 2024 White House presidential election. A couple of candidates joined the Republican Party nomination or race for the GOP nomination for 2024 Oval Office this week. Tim Scott and Ron DeSantis expected to join. Let's just talk predictions here. Mm-hmm. Is there any scenario that you can see where we are not looking at Joe Biden and Donald Trump again 1 year from now?
It is hard to see, any other scenario. It certainly will be Joe Biden. And I think that, on the Republican side, every candidate that enters the race enters into the race in an attempt to try and pull away, or knowing, I guess, that they will have to pull away voters from Donald Trump. And that does not seem likely. I think we've seen DeSantis, continuing to tumble in the polls. Everyone else is, polling in the single digits. There doesn't seem to be anything on the horizon that's going to change that dynamic. And quite frankly, it feels in many ways that as people enter the race, that many of them are actually just playing for the role of vice president, and, elevating their profile in that way. It doesn't seem like there's anyone that is going to be able to pull away voters from Trump in significant enough numbers that it actually makes them viable in terms of, winning the nomination. We're a long ways off still, right? It feels maybe closer, but we're a long ways off, and maybe dynamics change, and who knows what happens with the various indictments that the former president is facing. But it does not seem at this moment that there's a scenario in which he is not the nominee.
We are wrapping up this edition of Political Update here at the Digital Desk and Atlanta News First. here in Midtown Atlanta with Adrienne Stropschreier. She is the Executive Director of Black PAC, Black PAC, and also affiliated with the Black Progressive Action Coalition. Tell us in closing a little bit about the organization that you're involved with and what your political priorities are.
Yeah, so we are, we are a part of the effort to expand our electorate and to make sure that every American who is eligible and has the opportunity to participate in our democracy does. So we spend our time reaching out in Black communities, making sure that Black voters understand the process for voting, to make sure that they are clear, particularly as we see voting laws changing around the country, that they are aware of what they need to do to be able to participate in our democracy. And we encourage and mobilize voters to turn out for elections, certainly the big elections, but also the small elections that matter sometimes more than the big ones for everyday people. So we do a lot of education to make sure that people have the tools and the information that they need to be able to participate. And then we will do big campaigns, field campaigns, canvassing to make sure that folks have the information to actually turn out, make sure that people are getting in sometimes what are long lines to vote, making sure they vote early when they have the opportunity to do so. Over this next cycle, we'll be focused on U.S. Senate races, which we almost always are. We think that the Senate is incredibly important, and we think that the American people don't always have the information that they need to understand the role of the Senate and the importance of the Senate in decision-making in our country. So we'll be focused on Senate races across the country, obviously the presidential as well, and some governor's races that we'll focus on. But really important for us to be able to grow and expand the electorate and make sure that everyone who has an opportunity can participate in our democracy at every level.
Well, Georgia will play a crucial role in 2024. We have a wide open governor's race coming up in a few years, and also Georgia's two Democratic United States senators will be coming up for re-election over the next several years as well. So we will continue to follow all those and more here at Atlanta News First. Thanks for watching this edition of Political Update on our digital streaming desk.